Will Smith says he borrowed $10,000 or 10 racks from a drug dealer after he went broke from not paying taxes. So, Will Smith recently shared that at the beginning of his career, he borrowed $10,000 from a drug dealer when he became broke after failing to pay his tax debt in the early 1990s. During a Thursday appearance at the Savoy Theatre in London to promote his autobiography Will, Smith talked to the actor Idris Elba about his financial problems after becoming famous. Which, by the way, Idris Elba, awesome voice. Awesome voice, awesome actor. I'm not sure what the government is like with taxes in the UK, but in the US they take it seriously, Smith told the audience, according to a video captured by Metro. So Uncle Sam wanted his money, he continued, adding, I didn't forget, I just didn't pay. I had to sell everything, and I knew whatever my new life was going to be, I could feel it was going to be in Los Angeles, he said. So I borrowed $10,000 from a friend of mine who was a purveyor of neighborhood pharmaceuticals, he continued as the audience laughed. Was his name Stringer Bell? Elba responded, mentioning the character he played on HBO's The Wire. The King Richard star said he almost declared bankruptcy before ultimately moving to Los Angeles and winning the lead role on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. According to Will Smith, a biography, the IRS garnished 70% of his salary over the first 3 seasons of the show. That is scary, right? Can you imagine that basically 70% of your paycheck is stolen from you? That is scary as can be. And this is the importance of getting a very good tax person, accountant, all that kind of stuff, right? So that you don't screw up. Because the government is kind of like a situation where they know how much taxes you owe them, but they're not going to tell you exactly how much you owe. And if you get it wrong, they're basically going to go after you, right? So you want to do everything by the book as point A to point B, dot here, sign here, as clean and clear as possible because the IRS is no joke and they're going to try to go after you if you don't pay them. So Smith ended the night by performing a medley of his hits alongside his frequent collaborator Jazzy Jeff, including Brand New Funk, Switch, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Summertime. And so on November 8th, Smith embarked on a 5-date book tour to promote his memoir, beginning in his hometown of Philadelphia and making stops in Brooklyn, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and London. Now, this is kind of like a situation that you can learn from, right? Because this kind of goes to show you that no one is really above the government in the sense that if the government wants you to pay something, you're pretty much going to pay it, right? Regardless of how wealthy you are, regardless of how powerful you are pretty much bending over backwards for the tax man, right? And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that it's a serious thing that you need to take seriously, right? And this is the problem that a lot of people have in terms of their personal finances, right? A lot of people just think that, oh, this money's going to last forever, or if they just get money, they think that, it's not that big of a deal, right? This is where you get into the situations where if people are financially illiterate, they could really end up screwing themselves, right? For example, let's say that you are someone that lives paycheck to paycheck, has credit card debt, has student loan debt, has, car payments, right? Maybe have a mortgage as well, right? So you're having all this amount of debt. and you're living paycheck to paycheck. And by the way, because your financial situation is so crappy that you are not up to date with your taxes, or that you're not correct on your taxes, or you simply haven't paid your taxes for years, right? Because there's no margin in your thing, right? And so basically, you're continuously shooting your foot until the IRS comes around, and they end up coming around, right? You're basically in an extremely dire situation that even if you were to file bankruptcy, you still are going to have to pay taxes toward the government, right? The government's still going to want their money, right? And it gets into a really crazy situation that you could end up being someone who makes really good amounts of money and still end up screwing yourselves by simply not paying your taxes. And another way to look at it too is, let's say that you were, let's just say, lucky enough, right, to actually, let's not do the lottery thing. Let's put it like this, right? A lot of people, when they get their first job or they get their first career, they think that the money that they make is their own, right? They think that the money that they make is truly what they make, right? Meaning that, let's say that you make 100K in a single year, right? You're thinking that you're making 100K a single year, right? But in reality, you're not. You're really, depending on your state and also, the county, potentially the all that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of tax laws, right? And tax rules that you could be in a situation where, technically speaking, you're really only making maybe potentially 50 cents to 60 cents for every dollar that you actually make, right? So you might be thinking that, like, oh, your salary is like $100,000, which means, oh, I could just spend $100,000, right, and not go into debt. That is not the case, because in reality, after everything's said and done, after you take out the taxes and whatnot, you really only got like 50, maybe 60K, right, depending on where you live. But people end up spending like they're making 100 when they're not really making 100. Now let's get to like a lottery situation, right? Where you have a lot of people who are very financially illiterate who tend to play the lottery, and guess what? Some of them will win, right? This is where you get into the situation where you got someone who, let's just say, wins like a $100 million lottery jackpot, like 100 million, right? They get into this situation where they think, oh, I just won $100 million. That means I got $100 million, not understanding that no, you do not actually get $100 million. You got to pay taxes on it, and you got to pay a lot of taxes on it. So you really only got more like $40 million after everything's said and done, right? But you have people basically spending more than what they actually make because they believe that first amount is actually what they're going to take home, when it's not, right? And this is where people get into very sticky situations because they don't understand how much taxes actually impact their life, right? And this is why it's very important to understand your finances, or at the very least, get yourself into a situation where you're debt free, you have a budget, you have an emergency fund, and you are automatically investing towards your future, so that you can basically weather any storms that might come up, or any screw ups that you might end up doing in terms of taxes, right? Because people make mistakes, right? So you might end up doing everything correct, and then you might just end up screwing up somewhere in terms of your taxes and how much you're supposed to pay or not pay. And so you end up having to pay a fine or something, right? Well, if you're debt free, you got money in the bank for like an emergency fund, and you already have money going towards investments, well, guess what? You could just dip into your emergency fund to cover this mistake that you made in terms of your taxes, and be okay, and not end up having 70% of your paycheck taken away from you by the government, okay? This is why it is very important to understand your finances.